So most people probably already understand the importance of publishing, but what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just highlight some important factors for that. And then we're going to talk to you about why it's really important to consider open access measures and and what does that mean and what is predatory publishing and what are issues that you should be aware of. And we're going to talk about tools that can help you actually determine what are the appropriate journals to publish in. And then we want to talk a little bit about the peer review process, not necessarily for you acting as a peer reviewer, but when you go to write up your manuscript, what are some of the questions that peer reviewers ask themselves? What we're doing is we're flipping the script. If peer reviewers are asking themselves this question, it's probably a good idea to use those questions as well when you're writing your own manuscript. So we kind of flip the script a little bit. So oftentimes people will ask us at the library, they'll be like, where do I start? If I want to write any type of manuscript, whether it's a literature review or knowledge synthesis, like a systematic review, or if perhaps they're writing an opinion piece or a commentary. I mean, there's so many different types of manuscripts and articles out there to write. And so these are kind of the three main go-to points that we've talked about, but you probably also have other places that you go. So oftentimes, you've probably already kind of done a literature, like seen a literature review on this topic already on your topic perhaps, or perhaps, it's you were reading another type of literature review and this idea came across. So that's kind of one place, within the references even of other reviews or other articles, that's one place that people go as they kind of start gathering their own little library, right, to get ideas. The other thing is your own bibliography. As we're all academics in many, many ways, we probably have a stash somewhere, whether it's printed off PDF somewhere or, in Zotero or some sort of EndNote, or maybe you just have them saved in a folder marked to be read that you will never read on your own, desktop or computer. So that's kind of another way that, people start building their libraries. Another time too is colleagues through word of mouth, whether it's, a colleague being like, hey, you should read this. When I say word of mouth as well, sometimes it's on social media, Twitter, a lot of people share things or, other types of social media sharing platforms. So when you're trying to kind of get an idea of where to get your material, but also where you want to publish, oftentimes, you can go look at literature reviews, see where they were published, and then that journal might be a consideration. Same thing in your bibliography if you're reading the references pages, or you could also talk to colleagues. So these are kind of where places that you can kind of start if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed on where to look. Some of the factors when you're publishing is that are important for what you're going to consider. So these may seem pretty straightforward, but I just want to kind of highlight them on a higher level, right? Because the problem is when you're teaching a group of Department of Faculty Medicine or anywhere really, the topics for different journals can be sometimes so narrow that you want to focus there, or they might be broad enough to be read by the, in this case, perhaps the medical profession or medical education or health professions as a whole. So when you're trying to consider what journal that you would like to publish in, the aim and the scope of the journal is one of your most important factors to look at, to actually go to the website and check out who's their audience, who do they cater to, looking at their table of contents of the last few issues, what are some of the topics that they do? Because, for example, some journals will publish systematic reviews and others will not, right? So that's a really, really important perspective that you have to think about when you go to publish your paper. And especially if your paper is multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary in different ways, then you really need to think about is where it would be best suited for it. Another thing is that kind of goes with aim and scope of the journal is topic relevance, right? So, you have some journals that come out more frequently than others, right? So if it's something like right now, obviously COVID is a very hard hitting topic, so some journals, if they only publish like, every spring, summer, winter, or fall for 3 or 4 times a year, and you want to get something out a little bit faster, right? Then what you might want to do is you might want to decide to do a journal that perhaps publishes once a month, twice a month, once a week, right? So again, that that will influence perhaps where you choose not only the topic itself that you're writing about, but the frequency that the actual journal publishes in. As I mentioned, one of the things that you can do to see if your journal is that your article is a good fit is looking at those previous issues, right? Kind of scanning back, or you can even go to the journal's website and do a quick search to see if, they publish your type of review. Do they do other types of like commentaries, opinions, right? How are they written? And so you can kind of see, because most of them have a structure that they like to kind of stick to and a style. So that is another thing to it's kind of like your pre-homework that you're doing before you go to, write up your whole manuscript, I'm sorry. So we're going to talk a little bit about peer review, because sometimes the peer review process for one journal is very different than another journal. They could have a different turnaround time. They could have a longer wait period. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in our session together. So I did kind of brush on this a little bit with the peer review, but timeliness is really, really important about the frequency and the speed that they publish, again, depending on topic, depending on the journal itself. And so it's just something to kind of keep in mind, because, especially because of the pandemic, some manuscripts and some articles have sat there for like 6 months, and you've had and authors have had to like retract from that journal to go submit somewhere else because it was just taking too long. So that is definitely a huge challenge that can affect when your article would actually be published. Another consideration that you might want to think about, and this can get kind of dicey, which is why we're going to talk about predatory publishing today, is I say indexing and abstracting. Now that's a very librarian lingo. So what do I mean by that? So what happens is once an article is published in a journal, depending on that journal, it will then be indexed in different databases, PubMed, Medline, maybe if there's like a psychosocial twist to it, like, PsycInfo, if it's more of a nursing, allied health, probably in a database called CINAHL, which caters to that population. So it's important to think about, if I'm going to publish in a certain journal, right, it's about visibility and how easily is it discovered. And that's what I mean by enhancing discoverability. And so this is not to say that if it's a newer journal, that it shouldn't be published in, because new journals, they start up very frequently, especially, when with so much interdisciplinary research happening. So it's important to have these newer journals to be able to meet more niche markets on a certain topic. So that makes sense. But sometimes they won't be indexed right away, right? But if there are other ways to discover it, because it's not in a database just quite yet because it's pretty new, right? It doesn't affect the quality of it, but you might want to think, well, maybe you can access it through Google Scholar, maybe through other mediums, besides the traditional database. So these are just things to kind of bear in mind, because again, this probably will be influenced by who your audience is. Now, something that's really important that people often have questions about is copyright. And we're going to talk a little bit about this copyright in the open access session, which will come up in just a bit. But I just want you to know and be aware of that, often journals will be able to be very clear on what their copyright positions are. Okay, you can often read it under, when you go to a journal, there's like, information for authors and that kind of stuff. And all of that copyright information is right there. And so the reason why I'm mentioning copyright is because the biggest thing is that if you publish an article and the publisher says, oh, this is mine, and you want to go reuse a figure, like 5 years later, well, if you have not retained any copyright rights, then, and you've given them away to the publisher, you have to email, even though you did the work, you have to email the publisher and get permission from them to reuse it in another publication. And that's even though you did the work. And I know that's not fair, but unfortunately, that's just kind of how copyright works. So you just want to be aware of a specific journal's fair copyright position. And if you have, that could take an entire session for us to do, but you can contact the Copyright Office at U Ottawa. Oftentimes they will answer your questions right away. And I've put the link in the presentation that will circulate afterwards. And the other thing is accessibility. Who can access it? Now, it's great if you have a subscription to, an academic institution or hospital that you can get some of these articles, but a lot of people don't, or, even, within hospitals, they have such a tight budget that they don't even have access to journals. And yes, we can get it through interlibrary loans sometimes, but even that can be problematic. Or if you have a patient who wants to access something, but they don't have, access to a hospital, because not all hospitals have libraries, or an academic institution, how are they going to be able to read an article that oftentimes costs like $50, $60, $70, $80? Well, that, my friends, is where open access comes in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, because I am going to let Karine take over, because Karine is going to talk us through a little bit about open access.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm doing it a bit differently. So I'm using actual PowerPoint. Sorry, give me a second. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you today, and thank you so much, Lindsay, for this first introduction. I first want to mention that what I'm going to mention today about open access is most of it taken from our website. So the University of Ottawa Library has a website for scholarly communication that touches on many different things, including open access. So I just wanted to mention that. So you can certainly browse that website at your heart content, no problem. Okay, so what is open access? So open access means making the information which scholars provide without expectation of payment available online at no cost to readers. It's a bit of basic information here, but just to make sure we are all on the same page. And also, it doesn't only refers to articles, which is where it kind of started, but nowadays we talk about open data, open education, which are all quite interesting different fields right now where the open movement is taking us. And open access has moved from the sidelines to a widely adopted approach to research dissemination. In publishing, long-established players are moving to open access in their business strategy. And there's now hundreds of universities that have passed open access policies, increasing numbers of national governments and funding organizations that incorporate open access and open data mandates as a condition of funding research. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen this table or this diagram before. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain. So there's basically two pathways of publishing open access for researchers. There's the gold path and the green path, if you wish. Gold means that you're publishing in a 100% open access journal. And there are more and more publishers now, which we call in our lingo closed journal, that offers researchers the possibility to publish OA, meaning open access, with an additional fee. These are called hybrid journal. And without trying to be too editorial here, we personally usually don't recommend people publishing in a hybrid journal, or at least to pay in that additional fee. And why is that? Because this journal is receiving twice an amount of money, if you wish. The university will subscribe, the library will subscribe to the journal because it's still a closed journal. And then they will, on top of that, receive money from researcher, for those researchers who wants their article to be open to all right away. So instead of doing that, we would recommend a researcher to go to the green route. So again, let's say you are publishing in a journal that is a traditional closed journal. Nowadays, some of these journals might have an embargo, maybe a year, where you cannot put your manuscript somewhere else, but they will, and they most of the time don't have a choice, to let researcher self-archive, their manuscript. And so we're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So basically, you are making yourself, your article, your paper, accessible online freely through different venues, and we're going to talk about one of those. There's this online tool, wonderful, called Sherpa Romeo, that will tell you what are those publishers' rules. Like, are they allowing me to put my manuscript online after 12 months, or is it right away? So this tool, and we're going to talk more about it, is great. So now, another piece of information here is the version of the article. So those publisher closed journal will probably say that most of the time they will not allow you to put the final nicely formatted version that is on their website. They won't allow you to put that online in a repository. But they most likely will, it's not 100%, but they most likely will allow you to put what we call the peer review manuscript. So that version could be put on a repository somewhere online. So it depends in every journal. And again, we might have a quick look to Sherpa Romeo. In a few minutes, I'm going to do a few demos, and I think I'm just going to go there to show you what is that, and so that you have a better understanding. Okay, so where can you deposit your research? So at the University of Ottawa, we have an institutional repository. So I invite you to have a look. There is also a need function where you can deposit right away once you publish, your manuscript is published, and add an embargo, which means that the manuscript will be accessible online only after that embargo period. So let's say it's 12 months. So you do all the putting it online right away, because a year from now you might forget about it, but then you add this embargo. So then it will automatically be available online only after that 1 year period. So what are the benefits of OA? Well, first of all, increased visibility and greater impact. So there is research about that as well. When we make research available in open access, it's easily discoverable by anyone, anywhere. And according to a number of studies, it's more cited even compared to article published in closed subscription-based periodical journals. So that is the first kind of neat function or possibility here. Sorry, I was going to say something and now it escaped me. The other thing that Lindsey touched a bit on about copyright. So authors retain their own copyright. So if you want to reuse that table 5 years from now, it will be yours to do so. So author control their research, how it's disseminated, reuse, and share. So often you can decide, or you can decide what type of sharing you want to allow, etc. So it's a major shift from traditionally transferring all copyright to publisher in order for them to make this profit from research. And lastly, it benefits the society as a whole. The value of scholarly activity increases through universal access, as those who cannot afford costly journal subscription can access important research. So when knowledge is shared, it can be mobilized. Okay, so if you decide to take the gold route to open access publishing, the University of Ottawa Library has a few different ways that is supporting open access publishing. So quickly, we have agreement with publisher. So where with open access publisher, where there's going to be a discount for our researcher publishing in those specific journals and open access publishers. And also we offer a direct financial support for open access publishing In a nutshell, it covers 50% of the fee. There's a few, well, there's many details here, so I'm not going to go over that. So I invite you to go through that website that I put here in the as a link. That could be very interesting, I guess, for anyone interested in this, in publishing open access. Okay, so another thing that Lindsey touched on is predatory publishers. And they've been around for many years, and they are getting even more and more smart, if I may say. So what is that? What are predatory publisher? Basically, they are a publisher that say they are doing peer reviewing and they want to publish your research, but they are in fact not doing peer reviewing. There is no editorial work, and all they want is your money. So it's like a business. They are asking, let's say, $100 or $500 or whatever the amount to publish your research online in an open access journal. Okay. And they are using usually a very aggressive mass emailing scheme. And often they create websites for their journals that mimics real reputable journals. So, which makes it even more difficult for us to, figure out, is this a predatory publisher or not? And so we have more information and how to flag potential predatory publisher on our scholarly communication website. A few quick red flag would be if they claim a rapid turnover, like 2 weeks from beginning to end publishing your article. So that will be already a red flag. And if it's not indexed in reputable databases. Sometimes I've seen on website on these predatory publisher, they list Google Scholar or other. They say it's a database or the type of database, but they are not databases. It's not Medline or Scopus or any regular databases. So again, I invite you to have a look so that you can familiarize yourself a bit more. And also what we say on our website is if you are unsure, there is contact information on our website where you can ask us, people at the library, what do you think? Is this a predatory publisher? So after you've done your own homework, if you're still not sure, don't hesitate to let us know, and someone will hopefully be able to help you with that. Okay, so this is a part where I want to do some demo as well. So there is in fact tools out there that would suggest a journal where you could publish based on your topic. I just selected two resources. The first one is called Jane, Journal Author Name Estimator, and the other one is called Journal Guide. I do personally love Jane. So we're going to have a look at these two right now. So now allow me just 1 second. I'm just going to escape my full screen share for the PowerPoint. No, that's not what I wanted. Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I forgot to go back. Okay, so I'll start with Jane. Again, I put the link in the PowerPoint. So I'm going to put that here so I don't see myself talking. So Jane, basically here it's an example. You could put the article, your manuscript title or abstract here, and then you click Find Journal. So that's the first quick step, okay? And then right away, they are providing you with a list of potential journal where to publish this research paper you're writing. So I'm just going to quickly go over a few details here. I'm going to make my screen a bit bigger as well. Okay, so the first one they suggest is BMC Medical Education. And they are saying this is a high quality open access. And they are telling you why or how come they're saying this. So they explain where they took this information. So the DOAJ is a Directory of Open Access Journals, which is, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. And so already in DOAJ, they are saying, yes, this is a high quality open access journal. It says that it's Medline indexed. meaning it's a journal that is available and indexed in PubMed Medline. And it's also available, or it's, all the content from this journal will be put on PubMed Central. So anyway, this is the information they're providing you here. The other thing here is the article influence. What is that? So, So article influence measure how often an article is cited. So that's how they are calculating this. And sorry, I was just trying to figure out where they took the information. Yeah, I don't know if it's in Medline. Anyway, I would need to double check where they say the source is agent factor. And so, for example, this journal has in their calculation a lower impact, if you wish, compared to the second one, which is academic medicine. So again, this is not impact factor. By the way, the term impact factor is the property, if you wish, of journal impact factor, which is Clarivate Analytics. My goodness, I don't want to say something wrong now. But this is something similar, if you wish. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's what you're seeing here. So it will provide you with a list of potential journals. And they say show article, that means what article have been published in this journal, and why is it close to the one that I've put in, okay? So, sorry, it's not in, I just want to get out of here and it's not getting me, okay, so maybe I need to, okay, click hide, there we go. Okay, so this is, I've been a bit quick, sorry, but that's what this could be do for you. They're not linking back to the journal here. I thought they would, but anyhow. Okay, let's have a look at the other one, journal guide. Same principle. You could, here I've put an article title. I could have put the abstract, paper mash, that's why I am. And then you click search. So that, sorry, now I'm in journal guide, which is another website that allows you or help you find where to publish. So again, here, I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain what we are seeing here. A bit similar, but a bit different as well compared to Jane. Okay, so here they are listing the journals, and here it's clickable, so it will bring you to the journal website. Oh no, it's a bit more information about the journal. What they mean by match, it's basically a bit of what we saw in Jane with articles. It's which article kind of fit or looks like yours, and that's why they are suggesting this journal first. Okay, under Unpack here, they are using, SNP, which is source normalized impact per paper, and this is coming from the database Scopus. So it's another, if you wish, measure for impact, but it's not again, the impact factor, the traditional one, but it's another one. So that's what this number means. And you see here, even the list is a bit different than, like the second one is not academic medicine compared to Jane. So it might be worth looking at these two, and maybe there are even more tools out there. Here they are saying the speed, and you see many of them are saying unknowns. I guess if they found the information on the website, the publisher website, they put it here. Okay, yeah, I want to mention quickly open access. So they're saying if the journal is open access, but I did some digging, and I believe they are adding as well journal, I can remember which one it was when I tested it, that are hybrid. So they are unfortunately including hybrid journal. And remember, hybrid is when it's a closed subscribe-based journal that allow you or offers researcher to publish open access with an additional fee. So they are, I guess they don't make a difference between the two. So I would be careful with this this column, just by the way. Sorry, I kind of went for quickly on the first one, which is the score. Again, meaning the match. Is it an exact match? And again, here I'm kind of using a title that has been published. So, and it was published in BMC Medical Education, which is why you see a perfect one. But you most likely will see different type of scores. But again, it's just a quick look, so that a quick number like that could be useful. So before I go back to my PowerPoint, since I'm here on the web, I want to show you Sherpa Romeo. So I did mention to you guys Sherpa. What is this? So again, it's a website, or, it's open website. So if you put a journal name, so after you've done some digging, you say, oh, you know what about this journal? I want to know more about it. And I did just one example. I hope it will remember it. So I search for the journal, Canadian Journal of Anesthesia. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. So here it says the different pathways of publishing open access with these journals. And the first one, they're saying the published version, so the publisher published version is not permitted to put in a repository. So the accepted version, so usually that means the after peer reviewing. Yes, it's possible. Sorry, I'm just going to click on the little plus sign. There's no embargo. Oh, they say this one is specifically for the author homepage. Let's have a look. Okay. Okay, sorry. Let's have a look at this one, which is more the one that I meant before. Okay. So the same thing, accepted version. It says 12 months embargo on any institutional repository. For example, like your research. Anyways, and there's more information here. For example, they usually say, well, you must, acknowledge the source, which is the published version, with a link to the published version with the DOI. So there we go. So this is what you might see more often than not, but I don't want to say that's the only thing you'll see. So it's worth having a look at Sherpa. So then you can have a quick look and say, okay, can I publish on my repository or what's not? Yeah, so there we go. Sorry, I think I'm going to stop here for my share. Sorry, for the web version, and go back into the PowerPoint. So allow me another quick minute. And I need to change my setting. Okay. Next, we want to talk about Orchid. What is Orchid? So I don't know if any of you have heard of it before, and maybe you've had or you're already using it, which is wonderful. So Orchid is a persistent and unique identifier that helps distinguish researcher from one another and connect researcher with their, to their professional activities. So it's basically an ID, and you can use it to do different things. Some journals, when you publish your manuscript, will ask for your Orchid ID. Not all journals do that, but it's becoming maybe a bit more common. But it's the main reason why you do that. It's to say, yes, these are the paper that I am an author for, and not the other John Smith, right? So that's the first thing. And it's also something neat where you can put, it's a link, a hyperlink, so you can put that on your CV, or your online CV, or when you're applying for grants or whatever it is. So it's kind of a neat thing to do, and to follow along your career. And the other thing is, for many researchers, they might change institution over the years. So that's the other thing where it becomes difficult when you're trying to find your own list of publication, let's say through a database, and you have to remember, well, when you're searching yourself, it's easier, but when other people are searching you, they might not know that you were from another institution 10 years ago. So they might not know which one are really you, because again, this is more a problem when your name might be a bit more common. Sorry, I don't know if it makes sense what I'm just saying, because if I would show you an example, that might be easier. But long story short, getting an Orcid ID, it's simple. You need to just register first. And then if you have publication, you would link it from, let's say, a database, and it will import all of your references. What I personally did as well is for conference presentation, I added those manually because they were not like published in a journal. So I added those to my own Orcid profile. So again, it was just a quick note to tell you that Orcid is neat, and you should have a look if you haven't heard of it before. I'm going to stop here, and you know what? I'm also going to stop my share. And I just realized now that before Lindsey stopped her presentation, we kind of wanted to ask people if they had questions from what she's been talking from her first part. So I think maybe we should do that now, just taking a bit of a pause before we go into our next segment. Is there any question on my part or on Lindsey's part?
I mean, it sounds like Karine's cat might have some questions.
Yeah, she's a good question for sure, as always. I'm going to mute myself now.
So Arya here, just a quick question regarding the Orcid ID. I just received an email that is saying that they want to publish something that I had published in 2016 in their database, and they require my Orcid ID. I'm not sure if this is a phishing or is a legitimate email. Very suspicious, isn't it?
Karine, do you want me to field that one? Because I've come across it before. If you...
Yeah, why not you? Thank you.
Okay, sure. So what happens is many journals, it's becoming more and more common that in order for you to actually get in order for you to actually publish with a journal, is you have to get an Orcid ID. This is a well-recognized organization that is, it's worldwide. Many journals have recognized it as an official source to be able to ensure, as Karine mentioned, that individuals that, have similar names, or for whatever reason, like if you move institutions, right, like you can keep track of the same person. And one of the things that I've been noticing is that journals that were not previously previously didn't require Orcid. One of the things that they've been doing now is they've kind of been going backwards and saying, you know what, in 2021, 2020, we started recommending Orcid, and now, going backwards, you have to do you have to submit as an Orcid and register with an Orcid for it to continue to be published, which is kind of bizarre, which I don't understand. But I think what they're just trying to do is do the connection of past articles so that they can keep track that everyone has the same, it's the same author that's connected to it. So I wouldn't say that it probably seems fishy if you've never heard of it before and there's no explanation as why they're doing it. But if it's a journal that you've already published in, and because Orcid is a well-known organization, I wouldn't be super suspicious about it, because it is something that I've been seeing in journals. So I hope that kind of alleviates some of that concern for you. Yeah, Gary.
Sure, thank you.
I published an article just in Canadian Family Physician less than a year and a half ago. And it seems as though not a day goes by that I get an invitation from a predatory journal to publish. Is there any way of getting off of these lists?
Nope. And I wish there were, because every day I have at least 4 sitting in my inbox as well. So does Karine. And I wish there was like a blacklist, like a do not call list. I really wish that there were. And unfortunately, there's not. And it's so frustrating. I hear you. Like my delete button gets a lot of exercise first thing in the morning with my coffee and my email. So yeah,
It started about 2 months after the publication came out. And initially, my first reaction was, I'm flattered, and then I realized this is predatory, and it's persisted since. The other question is having an Orcid ID. I hadn't really paid attention to it when I set it up in the first place, but I also note that I'm looking at the website now, and they're also looking for all kinds of biographical information about you. Is it worthwhile, or is it necessary to do that on the Orcid ID website?
I think this is to me, it's a personal choice if you would like to share that information. I personally, I don't. I don't think that people need to, like, professionally, people can look me up and be like, you're at the University of Ottawa, you know, that kind of thing. And previously at McGill, and to me, that's fine. But I'm very selective of what information I put on Orcid. It's not mandatory, right? Like anything you put on Orcid is, you know, is voluntary. And you can go in and edit any one of the entries that are there. So I would say that if you're not comfortable sharing certain biographical or details, then that's not a problem. And I mean, sometimes it's beneficial, you know, depending on if you're filling out, you know, something that requires that. But I wouldn't feel hard pressed to put information you don't want to. No.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I just
Kenneth?
wanted to add that I think many people see the Orcid as also their maybe scholarly CV, like it's a way to build your CV and to share it instead of having your own website with your own publication list somewhere else. I don't know. But I agree with Lindsey. Sorry, I just wanted to add that. Basic details, your institution, for example, I think is important. But other than that, yeah, I guess you don't have to. I'm curious now. I'm going to go back because when I did mine a few years ago, we didn't ask a lot of demographic questions. So I'm going to double check.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. Are there any other questions before we pop over to the peer review side of things? Okay, and we'll have a chance for, you know, if you've thought about it, for questions afterwards as well. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to share my screen again. And we're going to pop back into the PowerPoint, and then I'll do slideshow. Okay. So what is peer review? So what I did was, because I'm super scholarly, I went into the dictionary. And so the process of peer review is essentially, you know, it's a process of looking at a scholarly work, and what we're doing is a group of experts are getting together in the same field to make sure that it meets the standards, you know, of quality, of integrity of the science before it's published and accepted. That is the official definition in general. Now, you know, I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of the time, I mean, you know, you can look at, for example, some clinical trials, and you can wonder how that clinical trial got through, or look at a systematic review and be like, how did this become a systematic review? Because it could be so poorly done. So obviously, some, like, there's like some of the standards are not similar across the board. And this obviously is very problematic. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to look up, like, as a peer reviewer myself, I peer review for different journals. When I sit down, you know, there are certain questions that we need to ask ourselves as a peer reviewer, as we're going through the different types of articles that are being written. And what I thought was, I was like, okay, if these are the articles, or these are the questions that I'm asking as a peer reviewer, like I mentioned before, if I flip it around, these are also the questions that I will want to answer in my manuscript to ensure that I have all of the structures right and all the points that I'm including, so that it'll increase my chances of my article being published. So what does that mean? So first of all, the whole point of peer review, like I mentioned before, is to make sure that the integrity, the validity, the quality, you know, and oftentimes you want it to be original, right? That those articles going to publication, that they are of a certain type, a certain standard to ensure that it's not of poor quality. All right. Because if we have poor quality articles in education, that could be hugely detrimental to any one of our patients or even our community. So when you're now, there's different ways that this can be broken down, and I do have a link to Publons, which is one organization that I found that did a really nice way of kind of breaking down certain aspects of a paper that different reviewers might look at. But when I'm writing a paper, right, this is what peer reviewers are looking for, but this is also what I want to think about as I'm writing the paper. All right, so the first one is about the originality and the currency. So you want to make sure that your paper is providing something new. Now, by this, I don't mean something hugely revolutionary. It does not mean that it needs to like be groundbreaking. That's not what I want. But essentially, you want to be able to look in your field and be like, okay, so this is what's known, and this adds even a small fraction of advancement or help or a new interpretation of what's already known in your field. So you want to make sure that you're not just now you want to make sure that you're adding something, right? So sometimes even if you are duplicating a past RCT or even preclinical trial, that's not to say that it's bad that you're doing that, but you want to be clear when you're writing that you are outlining exactly why you are either repeating that study or what it's adding to the field that already exists, all right, to advance the knowledge. The other thing that you want to kind of consider is that in this case, is it of practical use to, people in the medical environment, or, does it present ideas of interest that can be used already, right? And so again, you want to have that element of interest. Like, why would people want to read your manuscript? What are you offering in it? Does it offer an issue of concern? Maybe that's the other kind of currency in it, is that, there's an area of concern. And so you're looking at it from a different lens, or you're offering a different viewpoint. That's another example of, originality. And we talked about this earlier, but is this paper that you are writing, is it relevant to the journal's scope, right? So again, thinking about your audience and who you are writing this paper for. I've been writing papers for a long time now, and quite a few of them. And one of the best advice that I've been given is that before, you can have an idea in your head of what you want to do, but before you even start writing the paper, go and have an idea of a couple journals in your head, specifically one that you would like to go publish your idea in, like your manuscript, and then look at how their papers are structured. And then that way you can write knowing that you want to submit to that journal, as opposed to waiting to the very end, writing it up, and then being like, oh, what journal I'm going to submit it to? Oh, I'm going to submit it to this one, and then having to change everything. If you flip it around and you already kind of have an idea of where you would like to submit, then you can write the manuscript in the layout that is, specific to the journal. And this includes, unfortunately, citation styles. Okay. So then that way, and when I received that advice, it just completely changed the way I thought about publishing. And I say that, for me, it was revolutionary, because I was so tired of spending so much time, not just with citation issues, but just how to structure, the introduction versus this versus that. And it was so different. So I leave that tidbit of wisdom with you going forward for publishing. Now, another thing that you want to think about is the synthesis of what you're trying to present, right? So when you're putting your manuscript together, are you clear about the argument that you are presenting? Do you have examples? Do you have a lit review to kind of back up your examples? Is it clear? Right? So that is something that's very, very important. And the thing that you want to keep in mind is that when you open with your argument, okay, of whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, you want to make sure that your ending, your conclusion matches your intro, right? Because you want to bring those together, because that is kind of the whole point of your manuscript, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end, and you want to loop them back together. And oftentimes, I've seen as a peer reviewer that people don't do that. So you want to kind of bear that in mind as well as you are actually writing your manuscript, you know, and does the structure of the manuscript properly reflect the title, the abstract, the introduction, the conclusion, right? And so in this case can be a research article, right? Or a systematic review or whatever, but you want to make sure, for example, in your title, like you can have cutesy names and that's fine, but like you want to have, you know, cutesy name / clinical, you know, RCT or systematic review, or like tell the reader at the very top what type of article you're looking at. All right. I mean, you know, is it a commentary? Is it whatever? I'm just suggesting this because it makes it easier for the reader, you know, to look at the title of the abstract and then completely understand. And that's how you hook them, right? That's how you hook them. That's how it's clear. And that's what will make your article that much easier to read and probably to be published, right? And that kind of goes similarly in the next 2 points about, is it easy to follow? Is it interesting? You know, and does it follow that certain organized structure that I mentioned that could be specific to a journal? Now, if your article is one that involves a specific like methods or, you know, if it's like a research article or something like that, or a systematic review or whatnot, not, you know, like excluding, for example, the commentary or the, you know, the analysis, not the analysis, but like a, you know, that kind of thing. You know, are the methods you used appropriate for the study? I'm making the assumption that by this point, as you're writing it up, you've double checked that and that's it. But you want to be clear on that. And you want to be clear on why you chose those methods for the particular manuscript that you're writing, right? Is the design and analysis appropriate and correct? You know, are you very clear and transparent on the measurements and the observations, on the methods that you described, right? Especially if you made a decision not to do something. If I wanted to go replicate in 2 years a study that's been done and I can't do that, well, then that means that reproducibility is out the window, which is super problematic if we're trying to increase the validity of something, because validity sometimes comes with repeating the same type. You know, if it's, especially if it's quantitative study, qualitative is a bit different. You want to make sure that the measurements and the observations, you know, are they clearly isolated? Are significant statements justified? And I'm going to throw out a controversial opinion, but I also think that it's important not just to publish something that has significance. I think it's important to also publish null, you know, or events where they're not significant, because how do you know they worked or not? Anyways, that's another question for another day. Lastly, when you're writing it up, a lot of the time, well, not lastly, but another point is that you want to consider how you're going to present your data, right? Like what kind of visual effects are you going to have? You know, so is it going to be a figure? Is it going to be a table? Is it going to be a combination of them? Right. And so, because that's kind of what also draws the reader in. And that's something that you'll want to look for in the journal that you select when you're actually doing your combing of deciding what journal, when you use, you know, Journal Source or Jane, to be like, okay, this is how they present their data, right? These are common tables that are used, common figures. So again, you want to make sure that those are also very clearly labeled and follow the organization of the journal that you select. Now, sometimes there are errors, right? So you want to pay particular attention to these. So, you know, if there are any, you know, calculations or interpretations that, you know, that could be misunderstood, it might be important if you can get someone to read your article ahead of time, or, you know, especially if you are a single author for an, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does, that you are a single author for a paper that you're writing. So you'll want to just get maybe an outside eye just to kind of look over, even if it's just kind of quickly, to look over that you didn't make any type of errors in that, and that everything is, you know, for example, correctly cited and everything follows the certain guidelines. Because the other thing too is that you can't just say something. A lot of times you have to back it up with a lot of existing literature. So you want to make sure that the literature that you've selected to back up what you're trying to say is also on point, because some of the things that I've seen as well as a peer reviewer is that people will have their statement, their argument, and then they back it up. And then I'll go look at the references that they chose to back up their argument. And it has nothing to do with what they said. Really, it's just that there was one sentence in there that they agreed with, and that's why they chose it. Peer reviewers check for that. So you just want to make sure that you're using appropriate literature to back up what your argument in your lit review is trying to say, because those are checked, right? A lot of the times, you want to make sure that your sources are citable and appropriate and credible. Now, I mean, obviously, if you're doing, for example, if you're doing social media research in medical education, for example, you might need to cite Twitter, and that's acceptable, right? Because of the nature of what you are publishing about. So again, this is going to be kind of a sliding scale depending on what you're writing about and who you need to cite. But bear in mind that you want to make sure that the point you're trying to make and the source that you choose to back it up, there's a reason for it to go hand in hand. That's the most important part. All right. One of the other things you want to make sure is that the findings of your manuscript are not already published. Now, what do you do if they are? Well, it depends on when you catch it. Okay, first of all, it also depends. So if you catch it early enough and someone published on it, you can take a look at their manuscript and you can, make a judgment call as to, what you're writing about. Does it add to what they did? Is it slightly different from what they did? If it is, you can go ahead. I know that some people, unfortunately, they were halfway through writing and then they saw that someone literally had published the exact same thing. And they were like, oh, now I put all this work into it, and unfortunately that does happen sometimes. It's unfortunate. That's just how much literature is out there now. So, there's different ways that you can kind of, work around it. One of the things might be is that perhaps the topics are similar, but the target audiences and the journals are different, right? So, perhaps if you went to go publish in the Journal of Medical Education, but your target audience could be physicians or nurses, you can go to a nursing journal, right? So again, thinking about different elements and different angles that makes sense, that, it's not a far stretch, but that makes sense, might mean that you need to kind of pivot a little bit. But these are just some examples of ways that you can pivot if needed. So then in the end, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that, not only does the conclusion summarize the scope and the findings of the manuscript, which is, what you want to do in the conclusion, but again, you want to make sure that the introduction and your problem are also solved and mentioned in the conclusion, right? Because again, you're just trying to wrap you created this story. That's essentially what all of these different articles are about, is they're telling a story in very scientific terms, but that's what you're doing. So you want to make sure that the flow from the top to bottom matches together. Now, I've kind of laid this out a little bit in one way, but I have put down here from, like I mentioned, from Publons, I have put a reference to Publons here. It's a PDF. And so what Publons has done is they've kind of organized it in a bit more. This is particularly for a research article, but you'll see here that there are other more specific questions on what peer reviewers will look like. But this might be kind of, if you guideline, I guess, for lack of a better word, but this gives you an idea of, questions that you want to make sure that are answered in your study before you want to submit, that you don't want to get nailed on by a peer reviewer. Okay, so I just wanted to give you another, I did some high level considerations, but I did want to show you that there are many other what do peer reviewers look for? How do I write an article? There are a lot of them if you just Google, but I wanted to show you one that I use pretty frequently and have really, really good questions when I've been trying to write an article as well. So this was a bit of a shorter session for us, but we wanted to not inundate people too much. And so, the summary is essentially there are different factors that you need to consider when you're publishing an article. That includes open access, what is a predatory publisher, and make sure you avoid them at all costs, right? We learned about different tools that you can help decide where to publish. And, because we've kind of looked at it, from what peer reviewers search for, we were able to kind of flip that around so that writing a stronger manuscript is possible by looking for what peer reviewers do and including them in your article. So we have different contact information right here for Karine and I. We have our emails. You can also, there are other subject librarians that are available at the Health Sciences Library. So if you have questions, you can just, drop us an email and see how it goes from there. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And it looks like, and I promise, yes, we will share the presentation. I'm going to send it to Maddie after this. We're going to send it to Maddie today or tomorrow, and then to ensure that everyone has it. So that is kind of the end of our presentation. So this opens it up. Are there any other questions that Karine and I can take for you or answer for you? Well, if there are no questions, which is also okay, or if you think about them, you can email them to Maddie or you can forward them to Karine and I. We'll be happy to answer them. Or if we can't answer them, we can definitely put you in contact with people who can.